The field waits, before the thunder of crowds, before banners unfurl and cameras linger. There is only the hush, the early breath of dew against grass, wind sweeping across corner flags not yet raised, and soft echoes of cleats tapping gently across empty concrete, of a ball rolling slow beneath a paling sky. Even games of greatness begin in silence. There, in the stillness before sunrise, a child is running. Feet small, heartbeat quick, collecting miles like secrets, chasing a shape she's not yet old enough to name. The ball always just ahead. The field always wide enough to dream. Nobody notices the girl, and that perhaps is the first thread of her strength. They didn't see her. They didn't see her coming. And that was the point. Before she was Mia Hamm, champion, legend. Symbol, she was simply Mariel Margaret Hamm, born on a spring day in 1972 in Selma, Alabama, second youngest of 6 children, the daughter of a grounded U.S. Air Force colonel and a fierce mother whose love echoed in quiet expectations. She came swaddled into a world built on movement, relocations, reassignment, reforming home wherever the road said come. The rhythm of her childhood was flight, from California to Texas to Italy, then back to Texas again, a life stitched in map pins, always the new girl, always the small one, and yet, even in all that movement, she carried a stillness, purpose not easily named. They called it a club foot. Doctors saw the twist right away. Her left foot tucked itself inward, folding like paper meant to lie flat, but braced against itself. Some babies cry. Mia didn't. She endured a cast, learned to balance in disarray. Learned her first truth young that you move forward, even bent. By 2, she was walking. By 4, she was running, faster than most. There was poetry in her persistence, though she never called it that. On base, sports were common currency. Brothers with bruised knees, neighborhood boys who threw themselves into games with unabashed hunger. Mia never asked for permission to join. She asked for the ball. The other children gave it hesitantly at first, like handing a heavy crown to a poor, unsure if she could wear it. She did more than wear it. She chased it until breath became rhythm, and rhythm became truth. In those early hours when Texas heat still slept and street lamps buzzed, lazily Mia would step onto the dewy grass of back with a soccer ball and shadows for teammates. She dribbled until the sun woke, practiced headers against fences, marked her progress not in trophies, but in the way leaves moved when her shot was clean. Nobody coached her, nobody pushed her, but something inside, something wordless, did not rest. By the time the Hamm family moved to Garland, Texas, Mia had grown into her stride, still quiet, still small, but on the field she was beginning to glow. She played against boys, strong boys, loud boys. They underestimated her, the way the world often does smallness, mistaken for softness, speed mistaken. For luck, she'll beat them anyway. With her feet, with her focus, and always with silence. Coaches began to see, but even as accolades knotted around her ankles, most valuable player, regional hopeful, national attention, Mia kept something separate. She never sought to shine, she sought to play, to be part of the blur and motion and effort, not to stand alone in its wake. And behind her, always, there was family, especially her brother, Garrett, older, steady, unshakable in the way only siblings can be. Garrett was her widest horizon, friend, secret keeper, encourager, the one who tested her without mercy, and loved her without condition. He believed in her before the world found a reason to. He called her Smurfy. She smiled, rolled her eyes, and outran him in his shadow. She learned grounding. In his laughter, she learned balance. And when she played for many things: growth, rhythm, drive, but often most of all, she played so Garrett would keep watching, so she could hear him say, again, "You're better than you think." Time moved forward. In high school, scouts whispered. College coaches leaned forward in the bleachers, brows lifted. And in the scattered rain of uncertain opportunities, one name came steady and clear: Anson Dorrance. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill had woven together a secret dynasty under his breathless brilliance. Dorrance wasn't just recruiting athletes, he was sculpting them. He had a way of naming purpose in places others overlooked. When he saw Mia, he saw fire under frost. She joined the team at age 19 and immediately left footprints across the program's untouched snow. But years before that, before the championships, before the jerseys, before the Olympic gold, Mia Hamm was only this: a young girl with a club foot, chasing sunrise, holding hunger in silence. She didn't raise her voice to be noticed. She didn't shout victory, she whispered excellence. Step by step, play by play, and still they didn't see her coming. And that was her quiet strength. She arrived without thunder. At 15, Mia stood on the fields of the University of North Carolina like a shadow stitched from willpower. Her ponytail was too short to tie properly. Her teammates, older, stronger, carried reputations ahead of them. She carried only hunger and second-hand cleats. But Anson Dorrance noticed. He wasn't watching for noise. He was listening for rhythm. And in Mia, something moved that no one had taught. Not skill exactly, it was something quieter, rarer, a kind of knowing. She danced with the ball the way breath fits a body, unpracticed, inevitable. Women's soccer then was not what it would become. In the early 80s, it was a rumor more than a reality. A sideline of the sidelines. There were fields with no bleachers, jerseys sewn by mothers, coaching positions treated as quaint validation rather than innovation. But even in such forgotten corners, something was beginning. Anson, fiery and visionary, had coaxed a team from the untended grass of Chapel Hill. His players weren't just athletes, they were pioneers with ponytails. He taught them that aggression could be gracious, that domination could wear a joyful face. And he made space for Mia. She gave everything, every sprint, every drill, not because anyone asked, but because something unnamed inside her demanded it. Even then, she did not play loud. Her touch was soft, her moves lineless sketches drawn, in motion extraordinary, not because they shouted, but because they spoke in calm precision. That fall, Dorrance gathered his team around a makeshift huddle and delivered the news. Mia had made the senior roster, not junior varsity, not reserves, the full U.S. women's national team. She didn't react. Others gasped, but she looked down, tugged at her socks, and nodded once, as if she'd already heard the whisper of future. Games calling her name. She was 15.2 young for a driver's license, not too young to wear the crest of a country on her chest. The team then was a collection of dreamers, brilliant, unpolished, and often unfunded. Away games didn't carry media crews. Uniforms were reused. Their matches ran beside high school track meets and under small-town skies. But their passions screamed like stadiums. Mia entered as the youngest, and with her came a quiet shift. She wasn't the loudest, never the captain, But slowly, she became the pulse. She watched everything. How veterans tied their laces double tight before thunderstorms. How Michelle Akers, storm-haired and relentless, leaned into tackles with faith and fury alike. How Christine Lilly carried teammates with silence that said more than orders could, but Mia absorbed it all. Then, without warning, she began to lead, not with speeches, but with the way she pressed even in scrimmage, the way she trained without watching the clock, the way she sprinted past defenders, not for glory, but because she believed in finishes. As her confidence deepened, so did her freedom. The confines of age, of reputation, of physical scale, none of it mattered when the ball touched her feet. She wasn't a prodigy. She was a practiced soul, working out purpose under open skies. And her friends, yes, now teammates, now family, noticed. They teased her about how early she arrived, about how goalkeepers caught their breath when she approached, but never the ball. She'd laugh, shy and short, then slip quietly back into drills. There were games in places where no one spoke English, and nights spent studying before training again at dawn. Mia didn't mind. Each trip was a page, each match a sentence in a novel she was unknowingly writing. She collided with greatness again, not in bright stadiums, but in muddy fields of suburban showcases. There were tournaments where they received participation pins, and league titles celebrated in airport hallways with vending machine sandwiches. Still, Mia bowed her head before each game, not in superstition, but in reverence. Every game was a gift, every minute a miracle of motion. She was never above the team, and yet, slowly, she became its compass. At UNC, her stats grew monstrous, goals tallying faster than seasons past. But she did not keep count. What she saw were the moments. In between how a teammate's assist whispered trust, how a defender's slide cleared 2 seconds of time to breathe, she began to see the sport not as victory and loss but as conversation. A call and response across foot and intention and finish. She cherished those conversations. There was a summer tournament in Italy. A crowd of dozens, maybe less. Opposing players towered and wore expressions lined by harder living. But Mia danced, not to evade, but to endure. Her feet carried something stronger than muscle, purpose wrapped in delicacy. Spectators doubled her as fragile, but by the second half, she'd scored twice, and walked off the field carrying mud and dignity in equal parts. Even international coaches began to ask, "Who is that one?" Not from headlines, there were none yet, but from whispers passed through dugouts, through scout reports scratched on napkins, through film reels quietly mailed back to federations wondering if women's soccer had finally found its starlight. Back at Chapel Hill, Durrance sometimes joked, if soccer were religion, Mia prayed with her feet, but it wasn't prayer of pleading, it was declaration. Every pass, every fake, every gallop up the flank screamed in slow crescendo, "This is who I am." Not a name in lights, not a pen behind some autograph, not a flickering chatter of interviews, just breath, movement, conviction. She knew what the game gave her. It gave her Garrett's voice in her head, telling her to push harder. It gave her a place to hold her thoughts, those too sharp for teenage language, rage at injustice, grief too soon to name, dreams too big for a single diary page. Soccer became her sanctuary, and in that sanctuary she built a kind of cathedral, not with stone, but with movement, not with sermons, but with quiet example. Her teammates watched. future opponents studied. But Mia never adjusted. She never inflated into icon. She laced her cleats double tight, pulled down her sleeves, and day after day returned to the same truth: a girl on a field, playing until silence turned to understanding. At 15, they let her in. At 15, no one knew what they had allowed, because even then, she did not raise her voice to be noticed. She did not command the room. She whispered her power, one goal at a time, one pass at a time, and already she was becoming something no one had dared imagine. The rhythm that could someday change the world. The plane touched down in Guangzhou as the sky stretched grey and distant above the runway, neither warm nor cold, simply ambiguous. There were no reporters, no crowds, just luggage rolling beneath tired hands and the smell of unfamiliar air, hanging like a question. It was 1991, and the first ever FIFA Women's World Cup had officially begun. Though it wasn't called that. Not yet. The tournament bore the awkward title of the M&M's Cup, a corporate sponsor for a world still unsure if women's soccer was a product or a promise. The players were amateurs, flown across the world into stadiums half full and headlines half formed. But Mia didn't think about any of that. She stood on Chinese soil like she had on so many unknown patches of earth before, quiet, observant, already stretching the hidden ache in her quads before anyone asked. The game before them wasn't historic to Mia. It was just the next one. Another 90 minutes to chase something invisible and important. The US team was built like a puzzle few expected to fit. There was Michelle Akers at its hard force of nature in a ponytail, striking fear in defenses with every gallop forward. Carla Overbeck, fierce in silence. April Heinrichs, the veteran spark. And Mia, the youngest, the swiftest, the quietest. She wasn't a starter in the first matches. She watched from the bench, eyes locked, legs bouncing, mind alert. When she came on, she changed games, not with goals, but with glide. On the wing, she was a whisper that defenders heard too late. A feint and flick, a chase and cross. Elegant, efficient, evasive. Commentators rarely mentioned her by name, but inside the team, she was already known. Her service on the flanks flawless, her work rate relentless, her humility unshakable. She didn't argue for minutes. She earned them with movement, and when the ball touched her feet, it listened. Michelle Akers later said of her, "She made it all easier. She gave me chances no one else could," and it was true. Mia played like breath, necessary unannounced. She dropped passes into space a half second before anyone understood why. She moved before the idea had finished forming. In the quarterfinal against Chinese Taipei, Mia was subbed on early. The humid air hung low, and bells from local vendors clashed gently with referee whistles. She floated to assists, endless pressure, lungs like engines. When the final whistle blew, they held each other like survivors. The scoreboard didn't matter. What mattered was the motion, how it felt to belong. The semi-finals brought Germany, stern and structured, taller and tougher. But the Americans played like river current, bending, patient, wearing resistance until it cracked. Akers scored. Twice, Mia set the rhythm. Sprint, pass, recover, repeat. Then came the final. Norway, November 30th, 1991. Tiane Stadium. 30,000 fans, some curious, some loyal, all witnessing a match history wasn't ready to remember. The US wore white kits, clanging with sweat. The air felt thick, like breath had to be won. The match began with shoves, collisions, urgency. And yet, somewhere amid the tactical chaos, Mia found grace. A sprint down the left side twice. A cross so elegant, it felt like it had been baked in sunlight before being released into storm. Akers waited on the receiving end both times. Goals, 2 of them. And suddenly, the US led to -0. Norway clawed back. 2-1, the pitch, slippery underfoot. Foam, rain had begun to fall in the kind of mist that doesn't land, it lingers. Mia kept running, pressing, watching, not for mistakes, but for opportunities disguised as them in the final minutes. With time thinning fast, Norway pressed forward, like a wild tide. Crosses, corners, corners again. Bodies clattered in the box. Mia withdrew deep, tracking a run with the same hunger she chased goals. Defense was never beneath her. It was part of the rhythm. And then the whistle. No pyrotechnics, no gold confetti. Just the sound of exhalation from women who had carried the country on their backs. Without anyone asking, the final score, 2-1. World champions. They gathered on the field, eyes red, smiles clumsy, soaking in a moment no one quite knew how to hold. There were no broadcast replays, no post-match profiles. The victory was real but quiet, like a secret victory carried home in carry-on bags. They posed for a photo, with a modest trophy and medals that felt heavier in emotion than in metal. Michelle Akers held Mia's shoulders and whispered something that reporters didn't catch. Julie Foudy teared up at the anthem, Mia. She looked down, then looked forward. She wasn't finished. The world barely stirred. Sports pages gave them a paragraph. Nike didn't call. Cameras didn't chase. But something had shifted. Young girls saw the headlines. Coaches took note. Somewhere in Nebraska, a middle schooler asked her parents for cleats. Somewhere in Brooklyn, a gym teacher rewound the VHS of that Norway match 5 times to show her players how left-wingers demand gravity. Change had begun. Mia returned from China with a medal, a bruised thigh, and a notebook half filled with game notes. She tucked the medal away, kept the notes open. She was 19. Already her game had grown more than goals, more than assists. She played with awareness. That year, in that tournament, she learned something uncoachable: how to disappear in the service of the team, how to become both engine and echo. No celebration interviews, no late-night appearances, just training. Back in North Carolina, she pulled her bag from storage, laced up, her cleat stitched, worn. Loyland jogged out on the Tar Heel field like nothing had changed. Only everything had inside her chest. The weight of winning, but not as triumph, as responsibility. She didn't look back. She only looked out, across the field, at the next pass, the next game, and behind her, a whisper already rising in younger voices, in new players, in girls with braids chasing the ball in dawnlit suburbs. They didn't see her coming, but now they had begun to. Listen. Time stretched between victories, from the winter breath of Tiana Stadium in 1991 to the summer promise of Atlanta in 1996. Mia moved through time not like a hero in spotlight, but like a thread, quiet, constant, holding everything together. Even when few realized she was the seam, she grew with the game, and it with her, slowly, haltingly. The landscape of women's soccer remained stitched together by kindness, volunteer coaches, and borrowed fields. The headlines still belonged elsewhere: baseball diamonds, basketball courts, Stadiums where men's names rang like sirens born of birthright. But Miyashi did not chase the microphone. She chased growth at UNY. She became uncontainable. Goals accumulated her feet, weaving a tapestry of brilliance too complex for the stat sheet. But she never counted them. What she counted, if anything, was effort, minutes played, sprints not abandoned, assists no one noticed in post-match interviews. She deflected glory with the precision of a pass. It was a great team effort. She could have been wooden in her humility, performative in her modesty. Instead, it was simply her truth. She played because she loved the game, not in a Prescott kind of love, but in the way oceans love tides eternally, without condition, without needing applause to be whole. Still, the world stirred. More girls tried out for teams. Local parks saw higher numbers. Mia's name began to echo softly, like a wind-swung chime on afternoon porches, not barge trumpets of celebrity. Softer than that, but sturdy. Anchor, Dot, and Mia, she noticed. Not the attention, but the responsibility. She began to train harder, lift heavier, refine every touch, as if the next one might be watched by someone finding the game for the first time. But while the sport grew, so too did life beyond it. Garrett got sick, her brother, her pillar, her competition, who never kept score. Leukemia bloomed like a wildfire under skin. Mia was on the road when the news settled heavy over the family. He'd fought before. They thought it might pass. But it didn't. He passed in 1997. But the shadow of his illness had already begun to fold in around earlier years, early enough to matter. When Mia played, he was the ghost in her cleats. He had always been her pace setter. Now he was her purpose. Every assist, every sprint, a tribute. Not dramatic, not announced, but carried, quietly, like a letter folded into the tongue of her cleat. A private vow to honor what he believed in, her. After his passing, she didn't become harder. She became clearer. On the field, her play took on shape like prayer. Less anxious, sharper lines, more vision in her crosses, more stillness in her stance before corner kicks. Pain didn't crush her. It refined her. She would speak about it only years later, and then only when asked directly. Her answers were short. But her play said everything. The grief wasn't all-consuming. It was all dash-forging. Her teammates, already family, noticed the change. Christine Lilly looped her arm around Mia's shoulders more often. Brandy Chastain cracked louder jokes. Not to distract her, but to let her live in the balance of presence and heartache. They knew what she held. Even if she never set it down, in the quiet spaces between matches, Mia practiced. Morning runs before the sun rose. Extra touches long, after teammates had showered. Video study late into hotel nights. Not because she feared failure, but because she believed in readiness. She never arrived to a game hoping to find magic. She brought the spell with her during this time. She became a cornerstone. Public interest fluttered toward the team, mostly, still shallow and measured. There were features in local papers, pieces in regional sports magazines. Sometimes Mia's face appeared grinning, soft-eyed, never full-toothed. But even then, the spotlight belonged to the collective. She didn't mind. The game was bigger than her. In matches across Scandinavia, Central America, and on the turf of college-front stadiums, where 3,000 fans felt like 3 million, she moved like summer wind, hard to grasp, impossible to ignore. Her pass, completion became immaculate. Her movement read plays 3 moments ahead. She'd curl into space, defenders hadn't even left yet. She found freedom inside every limit, and still no celebration dances, no signature moves, just hands on hips, a short nod, and a return to her position. Sometimes the crowd didn't even cheer until someone else pointed to the scoreboard to remind them she'd assisted again. Some players renounced the spotlight and secretly longed for its warmth. Mia truly didn't need it. She needed the ball and the chance to face the goal with intent. By the arrival of the 1996 Olympic Games, Mia had become indisputable, still shy to the public, still wearing cleats she'd had since college, still uncomfortable in dresses for formal events. But to those who'd seen the last 5 years unfold, she was the quiet fire keeping the dream warm. Women's soccer had been granted a stage on American soil finally. Atlanta, ripe with summer sweat and cautious optimism. Corporate backers had started peeking around the corners. Broadcasters requested hedge. Tickets were being sold, not handed out. Yet even in that hum of opportunity, Mia stayed the same, still humble, still exact. When reporters asked if she was ready, she said, "I've always been ready. I just needed the moment." And when the opening match came, she didn't flinch. She floated light on her feet, heavy in impact. In those years between championships, Mia Hamm became something rare, not a figurehead. A foundation, not the star, the system, and she built it all without raising her voice, without demanding attention. Her brilliance was never for display. It was for play, and play, beautiful, eternal, effortful play, was what carried her forward. Every game, a ripple. Every touch, a calling. And across the entire world, slowly and surely, something invisible started to rise. It sounded like cleats against grass, like breath before a sprint, like girls everywhere, knowing that quiet can transform into revolution if you let it run. And Mia, always leading, never loud, ran further still. The stadium trembled gently, like a heart preparing for the weight of memory. It was July in Georgia, and the air hung thick with anticipation, humid, golden, humming with the crescendo of possibility. The Centennial Olympic Games of 1996 opened the stage, and for the first time, women's soccer stepped into sunlight that had long been reserved for others. This wasn't a side stage. This wasn't an exhibition. This was the moment. And Mia walked into it like she always had. Quietly, no flag draped across her shoulders. No bravado stamped to her stride. Just her jersey tucked, laces knotted, heart stitched to her sleeve in threads of belief built over years of silent labor. She felt no pressure from the cameras. They had arrived late. They hadn't seen the empty fields, the sleepless flights, the matches played before lawn chairs, and curiosity she had. And because of that, the crowd wasn't a weight, it was a wind. Finally, at her back, the team had been preparing for this day for months, years, lifetimes, depending on who you asked. Christine Lilly's cleats were near worn through. Brandy Chastain had memorized plays the way others memorize prayers. Julie Foudy vibrated with leadership, sharpened across miles of unpaved promise. But Mia, always the steady heartbeat, moved within it all like the pause in a sentence. Small, still, essential. The first match drew 25,000 voices. The next, even more. By the time the quarterfinals arrived, the country had begun to pay closer attention. Fathers brought their daughters. News stations sent real reporters. A nation used to watching women as athletes in passing now sat, eyes fixed and floors leaned forward, and there she was, floating down the flank. Long strides, low gravity, a kind of gravity of her own. She touched the ball like someone who didn't need to control, it only guide it in the direction of beauty and purpose. Her crosses bent like ribbon caught in wind. Her anticipation of play was timed like clockwork heard through oceans in one match against Sweden. She sent an assist that cut through 5 defenders and landed soft as a sigh at Foudy's heel. In another. She scored herself, but never raised her arms. That wasn't her way. Instead, she turned, jogged back to the circle, and nodded once to the teammate who'd stolen the ball before tossing it her way. And when asked in post-match questions about the goal, she said, "We just stuck to the plan." But the semi-final almost broke them, Norway, once again. The memory of Tiono Stadium returned not in noise, but in nerves. This was no longer a quiet match bathed in obscurity. This was prime time, nationally covered, expectations stacked like bricks made of hope. Mia, key to the defense, as much as the strike force, played all but the final minutes. Near the end, in a tangle of limbs beneath a high ball, Mia rolled. Awkwardly, a hush fell with her. She winced. Trainers came. She waved them off, but she knew something was wrong. The ankle pulsed with fire, not broken, but compromised. In the huddle after the final whistle victory, clenched in exhausted limbs, coach Disico asked who could play. Mia didn't speak. She looked up, nodded once. "If you need me, I'll go, but there are fresh legs." It wasn't defeat, it was leadership. She would start the final, yes, but she also knew when her strength was meant to serve and when it was meant to step aside. August 1st, 1996, gold medal match. The crowd, 76,481 strong, sent a hum into the Georgia Dome that since has never truly faded. It was the most attended women's soccer match in US history at the time. The anthem soared. The grass glistened, and for one moment, Mia stood at midfield and steadied her breathing. Her heart did not race. It still remembered Chengdu, remembered Germany, remembered high school fields and folding chairs. This wasn't a moment she feared. It was one she had earned, silently, over thousands of hours without applause. They faced China, swift and precise. A technical force that required more than heart, it required unity. Mia wouldn't score. She didn't need to. She led anyway. Her passes cut through midfield like compass lines. She tracked back on defense, shoulder to shoulder with defenders, absorbing contact without complaint. When her ankle failed her again midway through the second half, she limped for 3 minutes before signaling the bench. She didn't want to come off, but she knew the team needed someone who could sprint the next mile. And she'd already sprinted. 1,000 as the substitute warmed up, Mia jogged off on her own. The crowd rose. Some knew what she had done, most didn't, but applause followed her just. The same. Her hand lifted once. Then she sat and watched when the final whistle blew. And the scoreboard read, United States 2, China 1, gold medal destined for American soil. Mia didn't rush the field first. She took 1 second, just one, closed her eyes, and smiled. A real smile. Broad, brave. They had done it. Not she, they, moments later. Teammates pulled her up in celebration. Someone said her name into the mic. She turned, waved, and pointed at her teammates. The crowd chanted regardless. They knew. The medal ceremony lit the stadium in gold. The anthem played again, and this time, the players sang louder. Mia looked toward the sky. Not dramatically, just for a moment. A glance that perhaps floated to wherever Garrett was watching, wherever the dreams of 1,000 unseen girls now stirred more boldly. She didn't clutch the medal with pride. She held it carefully, like something breakable. Because to her, it was Dot. It had been built not on dominance, but devotion. Not speed, but constancy. Not declarations, but effort layered. Quietly, across years of early mornings and unseen workouts, and the kind of patience that builds empires without ever announcing blueprints. That night, under Atlanta stars, girls all over the country went to bed thinking 3 words for the first time. In their lives, I saw her, and maybe 4 more. I want that too, but Mia had already moved on mentally, at least. Not to fame, not to parties, to training, to new goals, to the rhythm that was still humming underneath every victory, because while the world cheered, she knew something they didn't yet. Legends don't end at podiums, they begin there. The world stirred differently in 1999. Whispers had turned to questions, questions to conversations, and somewhere between the echo of Olympic gold and a new millennium, the hum around women's soccer had become a murmur of revolution, and Mia stood in its center, still trying her best to disappear. The FIFA Women's World Cup was coming home to American fields. 2 packed stadiums, 2 television screens no longer indifferent. Sponsors had stopped asking if now they asked how much. Merchandise lined shelves. Tickets vanished months before boots met pitch. The stage was no longer crafted by struggle alone. It was finally built with full light, but light can be heavy too. An expectation has a way of settling onto shoulders, like armor made of glass. Mia felt it. She would never say it out loud, not even to her teammates, but it curled in the corners of her thoughts. Not fear of failure, fear of forgetting why she played in the first place. Not for headlines, not for records, for breath and movement and service. She laced her cleats and tucked her jersey like always. And when the cameras pointed and asked their questions, she smiled, small, honest, evasive, because the only answer she ever wanted to give was her play in the opening match against Denmark. Mia's touch drew a line in the sand. She floated into the game's rhythm as if she'd written it. Quick turns along the wing, feints like shadows. Her first cross bent mid-air before curling into the hands of the keeper, a warning. Not a miss by the next match. It no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a statement against Nigeria. The US surged. Mia returned to form like a river swelling after rain, patient and full. Her assist to Christine Lilly was so smooth it could have been mistaken for instinct. But it was art, repetition, turned to intuition. Fields turned to canvases. Then came the goal against Brazil, and it was everything and nothing. She didn't celebrate wildly. She barely smiled. She jogged back toward midfield, teammates colliding into her with joy she didn't need to amplify. She had done her job, not for glory, for gravity. By this time, her name was everywhere, on jerseys, on signs held high by 6-year-olds with braided hair and scraped knees, on the lips of fathers blinking back tears from stadium bleachers, wondering how something so simple, a goal, a pass, could feel so much like hope itself. The press tried to define her, the face of a movement, the hero of a generation, the reluctant icon. She rejected none of it, but she never embraced it either. Instead, she delivered in the quarterfinal against Germany, a match soaked with tension. She moved like thought. 2 steps ahead of play, dragging defenders through empty space only to vanish into the pass that opened the field. Statistics couldn't capture what she changed. She didn't make noise, she created silence. The kind of silence that swells before applause, because the crowd can feel what's coming before it happens. Suspense wrapped in motion, and when asked later how she knew where to be, how to move, she answered simply, "It's about seeing your teammates even before they call." The 100th goal came as if it had always been meant for privacy. A snowy evening against Russia. No ads flashing, no roar beyond the field. Just a long ball, a cut, a strike. And suddenly, 100 stood beside her. Name in record books, written for generations to come. She did not raise her arms. She pointed to the teammate who made the pass, by 108. The numbers had stopped mattering to her. She'd never played for numbers. She played to belong, to something fast and fierce and often fleeting, and to leave it better than she found it. Her feet spoke fluently by now, of tactics, timing, care. She wasn't outpacing the defenders anymore with youth. She was unmaking their footwork with wisdom, turning games with half-fakes, one-touch layoffs, positioning herself like punctuation at the end of perfect sentences. The Brazil rematch came and went. Tensions ran and fouls flew. But through it all, Mia stayed calm. A presence, a stillness. She calmed teammates with nothing but a hand on their shoulder. That's who she was. A pause. Amidst chaos, an axis people rotated around without realizing it. It wasn't just the goals, though the records added up like leaves falling in a steady autumn. It was the belief, the certainty, that if Mia was there, the team could breathe. She wrote a book. Somewhere in all of this go. For the goal, they asked her to include stories, highlights, swagger. But reading it felt more like listening to someone. Teach you how to share space, how to trust your instinct, how to treat your body with purpose and grace. It wasn't a spotlight. It was a mirror for every girl who had once stood alone with a ball, unsure as the 1999 World Cup spiraled toward its climactic final. Little girls wrote Hamm on the backs of t-shirts with markers that bled into cotton. Some didn't know how to spell her first name. Some copied the 9 with looping flourishes. But all of them whispered the same thing to themselves as they slept. Someday, I want to be her. And they didn't mean the goals. They meant the quiet, fire, the command without noise, the bold made beautiful without needing to be brash. In the locker room before the Rose Bowl final, Christine Lilly looped laces. Brandy tightened her headband. Brianna Scurry breathed slowly, and Mia tilted her head back, eyes closed, letting the moment arrive like a tide. She would go on to play her part brilliantly. She would align defenses, time passes, offer runs in behind that pulled entire backlines out of place so someone else could score. She would, once again, point rather than pose. What she left that summer wasn't just a championship, it was something bigger. She left a blueprint, not just of how to win, but how to lead with grace, and how to whisper a revolution so skillfully that one day its echo would be mistaken for the wind itself. It began to feel like the gentle tapering of a long song, perfectly pitched and slowly fading by 2004. Mia Hamm stood no less swift, no less sharp, but time had softened even the most brilliant edges. Not dulled, no, only deepened. Her game was not one of echoing brilliance anymore. It had become a kind of grace, absorbed quietly into every blade of grass she crossed. She had been on the field for 15 years, yet still ran like someone trying to catch a dream leaking just over the next hill. Each match brought new faces alongside old ones, new speeds, new questions. Her answer remained unchanged. Movement. She could have stayed in the game longer. No scoreboard had demanded her departure. No drop in form nudged her back. Only the increasing knowledge that the next generation was ready, and that some doors closed gently leave less of a draft for those walking in after. The 2004 Olympics in Athens were not her farewell by name, but they felt like it in rhythm. A quiet finale. She trained for those games with the discipline of a newcomer early mornings. Solitude runs, drills done until muscle memory gave way to poetry. She knew the podium didn't wait for nostalgia, and she would never demand victory based on what she had already given. Her teammates knew. Without formal speeches or overt announcements, they began to study her differently, not only to follow but to preserve, to memorize the way she organized a press mid-match without raising her voice, the way she ran through a pass even if there was no finish waiting. They rallied around her not because she was leaving, but because she had led so well for so long. Athens shimmered under late summer skies. The competition was fierce, younger than ever, hungrier than ever. But Mia persisted not as the star, but as the scaffolding. Her passes brought calm. Her vision froze chaos. In the semi-finals, she drifted behind the defense and slotted a ball you couldn't see until it touched someone else's boot, and then came the final whistle of the final match. Gold secured, teammates collapsing in laughter and ache. Mia didn't rush the celebration. Instead, she stood still, soaking in one last breath. A few months later, with little spectacle, no parade, no press tour, she announced her retirement. There was no over-rehearsed statement, just a letter. She thanked the game not for fame, but for who it had helped her become. She didn't write about trophies. She wrote about teammates. She didn't mention stats. She mentioned gratitude. The letter circulated quietly. Analysts praised her humility. Young players clipped it to bulletin boards, memorized the spaces between her words as much as the words themselves. Abby Wambach-Fears and Rising once said, "We get to be bold because Mia was patient, because while she played, she let us build." Mia never stopped loving the game. She simply stepped out of the frame. She didn't vanish. She wove herself into its future. Years after, clips of her goals still appeared now and then on anniversaries, slow loops on highlight reels. But that's not how she stayed alive in memory. She endured in the gestures of those who followed, in every forward who chased back just a bit harder, in every captain who gave quiet instructions. Instead of shouting, in every pass, made with more awareness than ego, she became less an image, more an ethic. When she was inducted into the Hall of Fame, she gave no speech. Instead, someone else told her story. Her daughters might watch it one day on an old screen, barely understanding how many hearts their mother had moved, without ever trying to stand above them. She didn't retire into silence. She retired into building. In the years after her final game, she co-founded organizations to increase access for young girls. Not just facilities, not just uniforms, but opportunity. She advocated for equality not in headlines, but in legislation, not on stages, but in meeting rooms and calls that stretched long into evenings no one photographed. She became of a Major League Soccer team, not to hold the spotlight, but to make space on the stage. Still behind the curtain, always lifting it, always handing the mic to someone else. She never sought to become myth. But she allowed her story to soften into folklore anyway. Lives changed, doors opened, and across the world, thousands of young women, some in cleats falling apart, some on fields made of dust, rose up with her name like a compass drawn backward and forward at once. And for Mia, there was always the field, still green, still calling. The lights have long dimmed. Cleats sit on shelves, now their soles worn thin, stories braided into each faint scuff. Fields stretch wide beneath quiet skies, their markings soft around the edges, gently fading like memories whispered too many times. Somewhere a whistle blows in the distance, not sharp, but lingering, like the last syllable of a song you know by heart. In places across this wide earth, a ball rolls forward with no one chasing it yet. The wind carries it over uneven patches of green, through chain-link shadows and beneath rust-pinned goalposts. It rolls where no cameras pause, where applause is a stranger, where the game begins, as it always does, in silence, somewhere. A young girl takes her first step onto that field. She doesn't know she owes anything to anyone, and she doesn't need to, because the gift was never meant to be seen. It was meant to be felt. The game is alive, not through stories of who stood tallest or who screamed loudest, but through the players who vanished into it completely, who gave it their breath, their bruises, their repetitions, who hung their dreams not from banners, but from morning rituals, the tying of laces, the tucking of shirts, the final glance toward the goal. Mia was that kind of player, and so the game remains that kind of sacred. They say time puts names in silver frames, that it wraps people in the varnish of memory until we no longer see their sweat, only their shine. But Mia's glow never needed polish. It existed in the space between, in the shadow of every forward who ran a little farther, every sixth grader who took the shot because someone, somewhere, once proved that courage can be quiet. She didn't change the world with her volume. She changed it with her rhythm, soft, steady, relentless. Her legacy is not a statue, frozen in victory. It is motion, in the shuffle of small feet on turf at dusk, in the half-laugh, half-groan of a teen who misses a penalty but doesn't stop practicing, in the soft click of a cleat finding purchase in wet grass, in the hush before a match, when all is possible and nothing yet promised. Mia lives there, still, always in the way a pass is made without looking, because trust goes before sight, in how a child places a backpack down softly, steps onto a field with sleeves too long, and begins to bive not in grandeur, but in effort. Because effort, repeated, becomes grace, and grace writes history when nobody's keeping score. This is what she left behind, not a path to follow, a permission to begin in the end. She did not need to raise her voice, because her silence echoed louder than noise ever could. And somewhere, across the fields, her name still travels, not shouted, whispered like wind, through nets, like breath before a sprint, like a story passed without ink, from heart to boot to ball, just Hamm.